Call, please.
Alderman Wesley,
Here.
Alderman Police,
Here.
Alderman Lewiton, Alderman Shockey,
Here.
Alderman Cadella,
Here.
Alderman Winger. Here. Alderman Coles,
Here.
Alderman Knipe.
Here. I need a motion to approve the minutes, July 24th, 2008.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, the other item we're going to go through is we know that we tabled a water rating billing analysis. Today, you guys were handed out a package, and Maggie's going to do a PowerPoint on it. And if we have any questions, we could address the questions tonight. But since this was just handed to us today after PowerPoint, maybe we can make a decision, or we can wait until the next committee meeting to discuss this. Maggie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Wesley. Before I begin, Mr. Wilson wanted to make a comment about the billings that went out August 1st compared to the July bills.
Thank you, Maggie. Chairman Wesley. I believe, as some of you have noticed, the bill for this particular month seemed possibly significantly lower than previous months and/or a significantly shorter reading period. What happened with this situation was when we switched over to the Springbrook software, not everything converted as smoothly as we would have liked. And so we wound up with a 6-week read period in there. And 2 months ago in your water bills, you should have all received a neon yellow piece of paper that explained the fact that it was a 6-week reading, your bill would have been higher, things of that nature. The bill that you received a couple weeks ago was probably for approximately 2 weeks, which is the flow through the rest of the cycle from that 6-week read. Because for 2 months worth of billings, you need 8 weeks of readings. And since we had one read of 6 weeks, you need a 2-week read to get you whole at 8 weeks. And so this is just the final flushing through of the situation of the system conversion on your water bills. Unfortunately, it took a couple more months than we'd have liked to have flowed through, but we are back on a solid reading cycle now, the 4 weeks, which is standard, and you should not see these sort of aberrations again on your water bills.
Okay. Last time we discussed the water rates and using a tiered approach so that lower consumption users would not pay as much. And the only suggestion that came from the council was to add a 5th tier, which I've done. And that 5th tier is anything over 50,000. I want to call your attention to the fact that when we put these rates in place for the water, the lowest users from 0 to 7,000 also have the lowest annual increase. And you'll see it goes from 10 all the way up to 20% for a user that has more than 50,000 in consumption. This does encourage conservation, which I believe was one of the council's goals, and it still generates sufficient revenue for the water fund so that operating expenses can be covered. So that's the only change there. But you have in front of you 2 things, copies of the PowerPoint, and you have 4 sheets here. That alternative 1 is the water rate that's been changed by that 5th tier, and it also is based on different consumption because Brad was able to give me the June 28th consumption readings, which were absolutely the most accurate we've had in terms of a normal month or an average month. So all of these numbers have changed just a little bit, but I wanted to tell you that the only real change in water is that we've added this 5th tier with the over 50,000. This is kind of interesting. If you look at the consumption patterns, again, based on the June 28th consumption, only 21.4% of total customers use more than 50,000 gallons. 2/3 use less than that. More than 2/3 use less than 20, actually. So going back to the tiered approach makes sense if you want to have the greatest impact on the most users. You will do that by sticking with this tiered approach for water. It does make sense, and it's proven out by those numbers. we went through these last time. I don't think there were any questions about this. We do know that there's DuPage Water Commission water increases, rate increases built into the model. And the rates go up as the monthly consumption goes up. There still is going to be a shortfall for capital. I think the last time the discussion centered around the fact that you might do your capital projects every other year, and then you would have sufficient income in the water and sewer fund to handle your capital proposals. And these were the assumptions. Nothing's changed there. 5% increase on personnel, 10% on gasoline, still using 88% of gallons purchased as a number. The city is achieving that, sometimes even a little better than that. But for purposes of a projection, I don't want to tell you we're going to bill 95%, because then you're going to have a revenue shortfall for sure. Okay, so these are the rates. You'll notice the fifth tier goes up to $10.47 in the year ending 2013. It's the highest rate, but I want to call your attention to the fact that the difference between these rates is really small. And that means if you've got a family, let's say, that's using 12,000 gallons of water, that's going to put them in the third tier. The difference between the second and the third tier is only 10 cents, okay, per 1,000 gallons. Just keep that in mind. These aren't huge increases, but the way they work is based on the percentage of customers we have consuming at different rates. That's how they were proposed. And I actually tried to smooth it out as much as I could so that each tier was getting their fair share of an increase, but no more. So there's not that big of a difference. It's only when you get to the year 2013 and you're in the fifth tier, you can see that the increase from year to year is a little higher. In fact, I think it's 58 cents. But that's at the fifth tier. That's over 50,000 gallons. That is not going to affect very many, if any, residents. Okay. The alternative I gave you last time, I'm calling it number one now, but it was the only game in town last time. That was based on using a flat rate. And the objections that came from the council had to do with users who were very low users of water having to pay this flat rate instead of having it graduated. So we came up with three alternatives to the first alternative. But let me just say that the first alternative raises the most amount of revenue for this fund, okay? But if there's resistance to that, then I've got two others you can choose from, and one that I'm going to show you, but one, it doesn't work. I'll show you why. And this was alternative one, as I explained last time. The flat rate disconnects sewer charges from your consumption of water. So everybody pays the same. If you use 1,000 gallons, you pay the same as somebody who uses 10,000. That was the whole purpose of it, so the city would have a solid stream of income irrespective of what was going on with water consumption. And the industrial food service, those rates were adjusted slightly, but that was the only difference. And as I said, that's alternative one. You can see where you see the blue highlighted line, that's the revenue that would be raised. Don't pay attention to the first column. That's this current fiscal year we're in, and that budget already included a deficit. But going forward, you see that there's at least $1 million, and then a couple of years later, $2 million that would be available for capital. Okay, alternative two. This is the one where we said, let's phase in the sewer rate based on tiers and top it out at $53.80, which was the old flat rate. So I did that. The small users, obviously somebody who uses less than 10,000 gallons, wouldn't pay as much for their sewer. But if you look at alternative two, and this one has the yellow stripe on it, it does not generate enough revenue. It's absolutely a ludicrous plan because it just, if you're going to apply it correctly, it doesn't generate the revenue that's needed. So I tried it because I wanted to illustrate this point, but it just doesn't work the same way. Now, alternative three uses a tiered structure, but we top out at $77 as the top rate. So here we have small users who are going to get just a proportionate share of that. And each tier, the rate increases just a little bit. This gives us approximately the same amount of revenue as the flat rate proposal or alternative. But unfortunately, this proposal was finished before I got the revised water information. So while I tried to set this up to match the revenue within $20,000, that really didn't happen here because I'm using new consumption numbers. However, this alternative 3 is still a good alternative. You see that there's almost $1 million in the year 2009, 2010. And after that, there's $1.2 million, then $1.8 million, and then $2.3 million. That is going in the right direction, and that would work out pretty much the same way. But at least you let the lower usage or lower consumers pay a lot less for their sewer. And I think that was the main objection. So 3 is probably the one that's new idea, gives you what you want, still gives that benefit of the tiers. The fourth alternative is just to come up with a rate that we would use to apply exactly as it's done today. Right now, when you get a utility bill, you get consumption listed on there. You get a charge for water, a charge for sewer, and a charge for garbage. The sewer rate is calculated exactly on your water consumption. So this is you doing the same thing, coming up obviously with a much higher rate to achieve those same results. And the revenue is pretty similar. If you look at 3 and 4, they're coming out pretty close. Usually about $25,000 difference. So I would say if you want the fund to be healthy, either use 3 or 4 as the goal. And if you want the tiers, so you're still favoring those small users, that would make some sense. If you don't care, if you like the way it's being done now, then go for 4, which is the same method, just a different rate. Now, here's the way they stack up in terms of usage. I pulled 4 council members' bills, so that the first 4 are from actual council bills, and then the last 2 are just 2 that I calculated myself. And you'll see, alternative number 1, flat rate. Everybody pays exactly the same. Doesn't matter if you use 1 gallon or 60,000 gallons, your sewer charge is the same. Alternative 2, big difference, because when we get to anything over 10,000, people are at 53.80, but before that, they're way below. And that's why this one doesn't work. That's why it's highlighted in red. It does not generate enough revenue. Remember, going back to that slide where I showed you that 2/3 of our customers use less than 20,000 gallons. That's why this one doesn't work. You'd be giving them a break, but there's no place to put the burden. There's just not enough revenue generated. Alternative 3, which is the tiers, you see how gradually the bill goes up till it's at $77, and that's at 10,000. And then alternative 4, because it's purely based on consumption, it's by far the highest. Look at the difference between 3 and 4 at 60,000 gallons of consumption. That's a huge difference. That's going to hit more commercial customers. That's not going to hit so many residential. That's going to hit commercial. So if I were to make a recommendation, I would say 3 or 4. I think probably alternative 3 is closest to what you've already agreed to do on the water. And it still does give that break to people who are not large users of the system. And it tops it out at $77.
Are we
Okay.
done?
Yeah, I'm ready for questions.
I have one question for Brad first. With the new software that we have in place, obviously we finally got in place. if we adopt the tier in the way you explained it last week, if I use 10,000 gallons of water or whatever, I will be charged for that rate. And then if I use more, my rate's going to change for just that amount. Is the software set up for that procedure now?
Well, at this exact moment, it is not, because that's not the plan that we're currently on. But we did look into it, and it is capable of stratifying different rate structures based upon consumption. So yes, we can put something to this
More or
nature
less,
in
if I
place.
use a 10,000 gallons that am at top or whatever, and then I go over that 10,000, I'm only going to be charged, I'm going to be charged at a lower rate for the first set, and then it automatically will go to the higher rate with the software.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Police?
Maggie, are these prices here just for the sewer rates, or
Yes,
is this
that's just-
combined with the water?
Those are just sewer. That's
So
just
that's your
sewer.
sewer rate, then there's another additional charge for the water.
Absolutely, they're two separate things. And the council's already decided on the water. All I was asked to do is add that fifth tier, which I did. But you did not seem to have any problem with the water rates as they were. So I didn't reproduce that for you again because that one was decided. This is the one that caused the problem.
So, can I continue? Go ahead. So next year, let's say the water rate here, if we go to this, what is it, alternative three, 10,000, so 7,000 to 10,000 gallons, what is that? Is that tier 2, 571? If we go back on the PowerPoint here. Right, if we're going on for the water itself, so if you're using between 7,000 and 10,000 gallons, your rate is 571. Under 7,000, it's 556.
Yes, everybody pays a fixed charge every month. So in the year 2009, 2010, everybody would pay $2.39. That's fixed, okay? And then the first tier, which is 0 to 7,000, $5.56 per thousand, okay? So that first user up there, let's just round that to 2. That person's water bill would be $11.12. Their sewer bill would be $10.30.
Okay.
Mr. Lewitton?
Maggie, I had two things. One was an observation, one was a question, but I just want to clarify his question. On the tiers, everybody pays within the tier till they go over the tier, is that correct? So if I use 8,000 gallons, I pay $5.56, just like the little woman who lives alone and uses 3,000 gallons.
For the first 7.
7. Then the next 1,000 gallons, I pay $5.71.
Exactly.
So I would pay 7 times $5.56 and 1 times $5.71.
Exactly,
So we're all paying the same rate on the same volume of water.
right.
It's just those who use more water go into the tiers that take in higher volume.
Right. And the tiers, as I said, look at the differences, though, between the tiers. They're not exorbitant from one tier to another. So if somebody just squeaks over one of those, the top level of the tier, you know, you're talking about, in some cases, 15 cents. 15 cents per 1,000 gallons. That's, I mean, it's not big. It's not a big difference at all. I think that came up at the last meeting, that if there was a family of 4 or 5, that they would be harshly treated with the tiers. Well, maybe they'll pay 30 cents more than their neighbor. That's about all. It's not a big difference. And I had to do this, you know, when you construct these projections, first I had to look at all the consumption. I had different numbers when I first presented this to you than Brad was able to give me this month of June 28th, which was perfect because it was a perfect average. It's what we know the city does, but I had all the details. Then I was able to see, and as I told you, 2/3 of the users in Wooddale use less than 20,000 gallons. So we obviously have to generate some revenue with those people, but there are choices as to how to do it. And because there was this goal of trying to encourage the conservation, it does that too. It does both, okay? It gets the fund where it needs to be, but it also helps to encourage people to use less water. But there are some people who are gonna say, I don't care about the additional 30 cents. You know, I'm gonna use the water. And that's fine. That's why it's America, free country. We just have to make sure that the fund is fiscally responsible here and generates enough revenue to do what needs doing with both water and sewer. And see, before your question about the financial software, the other software couldn't have done this. It's too complicated. This software, we can set up as many different parameters as are necessary to calculate a bill. And in fact, Brad and I talked about this, whether or not we should have all this printed on the bill, and I said, no, I wouldn't do that. I would put it on the website if people want to know, because, you know, some people do like to recalculate their bill, but that would be like trying to recalculate your electric bill or your gas bill. If they were using various rates, you would have to refer to many different sources before you could say, yeah, that bill is correct. And there's no way we could put this on the back of a bill and have it be understandable. But obviously it'll be important to explain to people that the rates are tiered to encourage conservation. However you decide that, and I think that's why I say alternative 3, it tops out at $77 when you hit 10,000, whereas alternative 4 keeps going up. It has to keep going up.
Well, the observation I wanted to make, which I wanted you to either concur or disagree with, is that when we talk about commercial rates and we talk about residential rates, residents get billed for water, sewage, and garbage. Commercial gets billed for water and sewer, and they're on their own to harness their own contracts for garbage.
That's absolutely correct. And that's why we didn't get into a discussion here of any garbage services, because your water and sewer ordinance is just going to cover those 2 types of utilities. And the garbage charge for residents is driven by the contract the city has with the garbage hauler. All right? So basically, once that gets negotiated, that's it.
I wanted to bring that up because it adds supporting documentation to your program, what you're doing, and I wanted to bring it up for the TV audience to know that the garbage is a separate issue. In commercial, it's 100% separate issue, and in residential, it's a function of negotiation with the vendor. Then I had a question about water allotment. You gave us a figure. I think I remember it as 1.7 million gallons per day from the DuPage Water Commission. Is that correct?
I don't remember providing that. It might have been city services.
I see a shaking hand going yes.
Allocation from DuPage County Water Commission, 1.707 per day.
Okay. My question, Maggie, is, first is an oddball question. Would they literally shut us off if we went over that? And 2, if not, do we get hit with a higher rate? And are we passing on that rate? Because I know part of the conservation is for us to stay under our allotment. How does our allotment and our billing interact?
I don't know if DuPage Water Commission would stop the city from pumping water if you went over the daily allocation. As to the other 2 questions, DuPage Water Commission charges the same rate for all of the water that Wooddale purchases, okay? The rate that the city needs to charge its consumers, it doesn't really come off of the water rate very much, because water is the smallest cost in the fund. The biggest cost in this fund are the infrastructure plus the personnel and all the other operating costs. You know, there's a lot more to it than just the water that comes from the pipe from DWC. So No, that has nothing to do with it. To talk about the consumption that I used as the basis for these projections, I used 537 million gallons, which is an average for Wooddale for the last few years. And then I further calculated 88% of that is being billed out, okay? Being conservative.
537
537 million gallons,
per year?
yes.
So
So if you divided that by 1.7, you probably come close to 365 days.
that's what I was going to do, but I don't have a calculator with
Yeah.
me. You do. What is it?
Brad's gonna do it. $537 by 1.7.
Mr. Lieutenant, how many more questions you have? Because I want the council, other council members to have a chance.
Just one. While you're calculating that is, you said in your statements just now that this is not going to meet the capital requirements for the infrastructure repair that's needed.
Not completely.
Why not, and how can we do that without going into taxes or other means of collection?
Okay. Brad just did the calculation, it comes out to 1.47. So I don't know where DWC comes up with that 1.7, but clearly Wooddale's under it, under the 1.7 allocation.
That's good.
Okay. Your second question had to do with
The
generating
capital
enough,
fund and why we're
enough
not
revenue for
meeting
capital. Well, that's what
our
that's what
goals.
this attempts to do. Let's look at the third, alternative 3. The first year of the new rates, you have almost $1 million that could be used for capital. Next year, you have 1.2. There are some capital items already in the budget, but they have more to do with the things that are recurring items, like replacing some telemetry or painting a tower or working on meter vaults, things like that. But when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about pipes in the ground, okay?
I am too,
And
about
that's where-
getting rid of our transite
Right.
pipes that are in the ground.
Remember that this year, the year that you're in right now, the mains for both water and sewer are coming out of the capital projects fund, and that fund gets its money from the non-home rule sales tax, okay? But at some point, this fund is going to have some money available to handle its own capital projects, and it should as an enterprise fund. But for years, the fund didn't charge enough. The utility rates were unusually low. So 3 years ago, this council voted to increase the rates and actually came up with a 3-year proposal and did it by ordinance. Now we're ready to do it again for the year beginning next May. And that's why this is before you now. This should get decided long before the budgets are prepared so that Mr. Wilson has a fair chance of getting the budgets done for you. And he won't if this isn't decided. But it's a good time to talk about water usage. People notice this more in the summer when they are sprinkling and maybe taking more showers or whatever. So this is a good time to have the discussion. And we are using very good consumption numbers. As I said, Brad took them from the June 28th readings. That was perfect. I came out with almost, I think it was 38.9 million gallons a month. And that's 537 times 88% divided by 12. I mean, that's real close. So I felt good about those numbers. I felt good about the profile of the users. And consequently, I was able to calculate these numbers for you. So there will be some money left for capital. It's just that when you look under the expense line where I've got water operating, sewer operating, water, wastewater administration, and maintenance, I don't have a big line in there that says water and sewer mains because we knew they couldn't be covered. And in fact, I don't even know at this point if those numbers are known for the next 4 years. Because they're going to go hand in hand with street projects.
No, they are not known yet because we don't
Right.
have the engineering done on them.
But I
and all
mean,
that.
you know, the point is generally you replace your sewer and water mains when you're reconstructing a street. That just makes good sense. You don't want to open a street after you've just reconstructed it, so it goes together. But these rates would allow this fund to get on a more sure footing and cover all of its operations, plus have some left over for capital. And that was the goal.
Thank you, Ms. Powell, and thank you, Chairman Wesley.
But,
You can say my name, it's okay.
Mr. Sal,
My understanding, right, that alternative 4 is not a tiered structure, it's just linear based on usage.
The way we do it now.
Okay, because I'm coming up with two different rates when I plug 1,944 gallons at 1445 versus 60,000 gallons at 363.95. The smaller usage, I'm coming up with like $7.43 per 1,000 gallons, but the higher usage of 60,000 is less at $6.07 per 1,000 gallons, unless I'm doing my math wrong.
It could be my math error. It should be exactly the same.
It should be linear,
Yes.
okay. Because this
Absolutely.
is actually the opposite of what we were talking about with conservation with
Right,
less
and
usage,
and
so.
which is why when I first proposed both the water and the sewer to you, I was trying to get away from that linear relationship and come up with something that made some sense for the smaller users and yet still was financially responsible. And I think the objections were that to the flat rate was, well, wait a minute, if you top out right away at the 5380 and you use only 1,000 gallons, you're really paying for somebody else's usage. And of course, the person who's the higher user can use the argument the opposite way and say, this is great, I can pay less than I have to. But having said that, there's no way to be perfectly fair, I hate even to use that word, or equitable when you're trying to come up with a rate structure. What you have to do is just have it be rational and have it work from a financial standpoint. So that's why we did these different alternatives, so you could see different ways to come up with the same results. But alternative 2 just plain doesn't work, because we said we would use that flat rate of 5380, which was the original rate I showed you, and now it's 5396, and that's because it changed with consumption. But it doesn't make any sense, because you've got so many people using less than 20,000 gallons. In fact, so many using less than 10, not enough revenue gets generated with it. So it just plain doesn't make sense. But alternatives 3 and 4 both make sense. And if you want to break away from the past, alternative 3 will work just fine and give you that tiered effect.
Alderman Coles,
Maggie, I believe we okayed the water rates last time. I thought we did okay.
Yes, except for the
All right.
addition of the fifth tier.